experience goes across many, many parts of technology and business. I have 30 years of experience in business and technology, up to my last job, which was to be the Chief Business Officer of Google X. Google X is the innovation arm of Google. And I use all of my experience to spread a message of happiness that is based on my book, an international bestseller called Solve for Happy. Solve for Happy has just been launched in Mexico under el algoritmo
de la felicidad.
De la Felicidad, correct. And then, you know, the approach of the book is a highly engineered and logical approach to a topic that is normally very spiritual and difficult for people sometimes to achieve. With you know, the book and online content and the mission 1 billion happy, our ambition is to achieve 1 billion happy people in 5 years. So, and I'm open for any of your questions.
I understand you do that in memory of your son, and you spoke about a tattoo he had in his back. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I lost my wonderful son Ali around 4 years ago to a preventable human error. So he was diagnosed with a very simple surgical operation that went wrong. And 5 mistakes in a row within 4 hours, my wonderful son was no longer with us. Ali was not just my son, he was my son and my best friend. He was my teacher in many ways. He taught me a lot of what I know about happiness. And so when Ali died, I had a choice to close my door and cry for the rest of my life. And I can guarantee you, if I cried for every day that remained in my life, no one would blame me. He was such a wonderful young man. But instead, I wanted to honor him by giving life. I wanted to make millions of people learn about Ali and learn about his model of happiness and hopefully find happiness in the process. And I was hoping that people would love him as much as I loved him and send him a prayer to be happy where he is right now. And Ali had a tattoo on his back that when you read it, it said the gravity of the battle means nothing to those at peace. And he had it at a very young age, actually at age 15. And it was the last thing I saw when he sat on the operating table before he went into the operating room. And in a very interesting way, it was almost the last advice that my son gave me. He gave me so much advice in my life that made me a better person. And I think he was sort of saying, Papa, you know, what you're going to go through is not going to be easy, but if you find peace, the challenge that you're going to face doesn't matter. And it's funny because when Ali died, as any father would, I started to feel very guilty about not protecting him. Because of my successful position at work, the Ministry of Health called me after Ali died and said they were going to do an investigation and asked if they would perform an autopsy on Ali's body. So I looked at his mother and I asked her, what would you want to do? Would you mind if they do an autopsy? And she asked one question that really showed us the truth. She said, would it bring Ali back? And the minute she asked us this, I realized that nothing we could ever do would bring him back, that he left. And with that realization that he left and nothing we could do could bring him back, I somehow managed to find that peace, that my new reality of life is now here, and I cannot afford to stay here for the rest of my life. The only thing I can do is to try to make tomorrow a little better than today, and after tomorrow a little better than tomorrow. And so the mission started with 10 million people happy, and now we're at tens of millions, and hopefully we'll reach 1 million happy because of Ali's departure. And I am hoping that because of that, he hopefully will be proud of what I'm trying to do.
How did you learn about happiness?
I learned about happiness the most difficult way. I learned about happiness by being very unhappy as a young man. So I was very happy until age 23, and then I started to become extremely successful. I had so much wealth and so much, things, as they say. I had a wonderful family, a beautiful wife, the mother of Ali and Aya. And I was depressed, I was clinically depressed. And I couldn't find my way out of my depression because I could not, somehow I just could not understand the language in which most of happiness literature is written. I am quite spiritual myself, but I just couldn't understand what does saying or doing yoga or meditation have to do with happiness. And so I had to search for happiness in a very unusual way, the way that my brain understood it. I'm an engineer, so I started to look for the logic of happiness. I assumed that this physical form of mine was capable of producing happiness because it did until age 23, and that something went wrong. Like a machine, when you give an engineer a broken machine, we start to ask ourselves, like, what went wrong? What can I fix so that the machine goes back to its performance? And so I researched happiness that way, which is very, very different than all of the other literature that you will see. I actually conducted experiments with numbers and statistics and charts to understand why we produce happiness and unhappiness. And then I would go back to Ali, my son, and say, Ali, I discovered something amazing about how we produce happiness and unhappiness. And he so instinctively, because he knew it at his heart, would explain it back to me and say, Papa, this is how you would see it from the heart. And so together we developed a model that was called 675, and that model managed, and the happiness equation, and between the equation and the model of happiness, I managed to become a lot happier 12 years later.
So it is the science of happiness. And how do you know how many people you made happy?
We measure, so it's the 1 million happy as a mission is not just my mission, it's a very, very big mission with many people volunteering and many people that are also full-time on the mission. The easiest way, if you want, could be to just measure how many people watch a video, for example. We have more than 200 million views on the videos of Solve for Happy and 1 Billion Happy, but that would be a lie, because this is almost the modern world's way of just fabricating results, if you want. We decided that we will only consider people as part of the 1 Billion Happy mission if we can get 2 measures at the same time. One of them is that they got the message of happiness that we sent them. And the second is they took an action. That action could either be about them developing their own selves and becoming happier, or about making others happy. So basically the mission is made up of 3 steps. Step number 1 is I try to tell people happiness is your birthright. You're supposed to be happy, and all of the lies that they tell us in the modern world, that it's okay to be unhappy, what matters is to be successful, that's a lie. Okay? Happiness is your birthright, and accordingly it should be your priority. Number 2, happiness is so predictable that I can summarize it to you in an equation. In mathematics, it's that predictable. Okay? There is an engineering model that you can use over and over, so that every time you feel unhappy, you go back to happiness. And because it's this predictable, I ask people to do the effort that it takes to learn about happiness. Just like with fitness, people who want to be fit will go to the gym 4 times a week. I tell people spend an hour a day, 4 to 5 times a week learning about happiness. That's number 2. And my guarantee, my promise is that if you do, you will be happier every week that passes. Okay? Number 3 is when you get there, have the compassion in your heart to realize how difficult our world has become to so many people. So many people are unhappy. And we will only change our world if our heart starts to believe that, starts to feel that others are unhappy, and starts to engage so that we teach others what we learned about happiness. If every one of us teaches 2 people who teach 2 people who teach 2 people, within 5 years we will get to 1 billion happy people on the planet. That's actually not a difficult thing to ask at all. Just invest in your happiness and teach 2 people and we will change the world.
¿Alguien más? Can I make one more question? What do you do in that hour? This hour you invest, let's say I want to invest an hour on myself to be happy. What do I do in this hour?
So many things. First of all, either read or watch videos online. There are many teachers and many masters, and most of the people that actually want to teach happiness, they don't do it for money. So, look at the content of Deepak Chopra, look at the content of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, look at my work, every concept I have in algoritmo
La
Felicidad is available online for free. We're working on translating it into Spanish. So spend time to read or to watch videos. Spend time with people that are happy. They will teach you, they will have behaviors that you can copy from them. Spend time reflecting on your own self. I always say that happiness is the absence of unhappiness. It's really interesting when you think about little children. Little children are happy by default. If you give them their basic needs for their survival, they're happy. You don't ask for anything to become happy. Only when a diaper gets wet, a child cries. If you change the diaper, the child goes back to happiness. Happiness is the absence of unhappiness. If there is a reason to be unhappy or become unhappy, you remove the reason, we go back to happiness. So spend time reflecting on yourself and asking yourself the truth of what is it that's making me unhappy? Is my relationship not making me happy? Is the job that I'm doing not making me happy? Is maybe the pain in my back not making me happy? Whatever it is, most of those things are things you can change. If you're not happy in your relationship, sit with your partner and have a conversation. If he or she doesn't change, leave. Okay? If you're not happy in your job, don't go crazy and leave tomorrow, but take 6 to 9 months, 11 months, a year if you want, searching for another job. But don't search for a job that will pay you a few pesos more. Search for a job that actually will make you happy. Okay? If you're not happy because you have a back pain, start to be aware of it. Start to invest in, working out or whatever it is. Whatever the reason for your unhappiness, remove it one by one. Every time you remove one of those reasons, you'll be happier and happier and happier.
I just have one question. When is necessary to seek professional help? Because if the people, there are some cases that people have a dysfunction at the chemistry of the brain, and there are a lot of people with these blogs and these videos on YouTube that you can be happy, but that people need professional help, attention. How do you manage in your side and in your effort to respect that barrier?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll answer your question in 2 steps. I'll tell you how I learned, okay? And then I'll tell you where the line is. So when I wrote Soul for Happy, I wrote it like software. I know this sounds crazy, but I wrote an alpha version of the book, and I put that online. I asked 120 strangers, people I don't know at all, to walk in and read it and edit it themselves. I gave them editing rights. Okay? I was asking those people to create a book that they would read. And it was an incredible experience because people would walk in and they would look at a certain paragraph and they would change it, and then others would object to their changes and they would have a discussion, and we would end up with a paragraph that meets what everyone wants. Okay? At the beginning of that exercise, I did a small survey asking people what their background is, what their native language is, which part of the world, if they were male or female, and if they were depressed. What's their state of happiness. 8% of the readers that actually read the early version were depressed. Okay? On page 11 of the book, I had a statement that said, happiness is a choice. Every single one of the 8% left the book at that stage. Okay? People who are already depressed, they don't want to be told that they can actually do anything about their happiness or unhappiness. Okay? They want to blame the world for their unhappiness, and they want to say, look, I'm not able to get out of this, so don't tell me it's my work. I changed the book afterwards and I made it a lot more friendly to people who are in a state of depression. I only have 3% dropouts now. Now let me explain to you why that happens. When we get, our body, most people don't understand that it's not our emotions that create our thoughts. It's our thoughts that create our emotions, and then our emotional state creates more thoughts, and that creates more emotions. And then at a certain stage, those emotions start to create a chemical imbalance in our body. When you're chemically imbalanced, it's almost impossible to think correctly. Okay? Your body is in a state of not being able to do the right thing at all. So people in that state absolutely need to seek professional support. Okay? And the only thing I ask is that professional support shouldn't end up at, okay, we're going to give you antidepressants and you can come here and talk about it every week. Because still, happiness is a choice. Okay? So the antidepressants, what they do is they balance that chemical imbalance in the body to the point where you have a little bit of clarity. Okay? And when we have that clarity, we should start to engage into what thoughts caused the emotion that caused more thoughts that caused more emotions. If we can find that cycle, then we can investigate that thought and find a way to make it work. Okay? This is one thing. The other thing is I ask people from deep inside my heart. I seriously cry about the state of our world. Our world, suicide is at an all-time high. Teen suicide is at an all-time high. We're letting our own children take their own life. Suicide is not a result of depression. Suicide is a result of depression and loneliness. It's a state where we feel depressed, but we're unable to find anyone that can help us. We don't have anyone to turn to. So I ask everyone, if you feel that your friend or your relative or your sister or your brother is going through that cycle, don't leave them. Please go to them. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that you want them to be okay. Ask them if you can help in any way. Don't push them. It's very hard to be pushed when you're in that state of depression. Just be there for them. Love fuels everything. I have so many people who are friends or leaders or fans or whatever who have someone in their life that is depressed, and the one answer I tell them is talk to them as often as you can. Every conversation, finish the conversation with the words, I love you. If you love them, they will have a reason to live. And if we manage to do that, we will at least give people hope that we can do better with our depression in society today.
What did you find happiness and what made you happy?
So I find happiness in making other people happy. And I am the most fortunate person on the planet to be able to do that every day of my life. So to make others happy is the ultimate form of happiness. And I'm asking people who are joining the 1 Billion Happy Mission to find that same happiness by making others happy. To me, happiness is a very simple mindset. My happiness equation basically says that happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your hopes of how life should be. Okay? Which basically means happiness is that peaceful contentment we find in our heart when we're okay with life as it is. Now the reality is that life is mostly okay. Believe it or not, even if life is often hard, sometimes difficult, it's okay. It meets expectations most of the time. And so to train ourselves, to train my heart, to be okay with life, even in the hardest times, when I lose my son or when I'm traveling for 6 weeks and a little tired and a little sick and so on, to find that peace and tell myself that it's still okay, I'm one of the most fortunate people alive, I think that's where true happiness can be found.
¿En español?
En español, but I need the okay.
Carla Dalet, del medio de Radio Kings Puebla. La pregunta de este libro, de su libro, ¿cómo es que nos llegaría a funcionar a los jóvenes o de nuestra edad?
Yeah, youth is a big part of the challenge we face in the world today. Believe it or not, when I speak to adults or I speak to youth understand happiness a lot more than adults. The problem with our young people today is that they're exposed to so many wrong messages all the time. They're under so much pressure, they're under so much stress. They're being expected to do things that are honestly not reasonable anymore. You know, when I was growing up, maybe I wanted to have 4 friends in school and I needed to fit in within a group of 10 people. Okay? People today on Facebook, they want to be liked by 600 people. It's impossible, right? There is no way we can make that happen. And so the youth are going through very difficult choices and very difficult challenges. Having said that, if we simplify things to them, if we actually tell them openly that happiness is your choice, that life will give you some challenges, and that no event in your life has the power to make you unhappy, the only thing that makes you unhappy is turning that event into a thought in your head and thinking about it over and over and over until it tortures you. If we make them understand that unhappiness doesn't change anything, that the feeling of unhappiness doesn't change the world. If it rained yesterday, it rained in Mexico City, it was a mess, the traffic was slow, everyone was stuck in the streets. I told people, okay, you can cry about it in the car for an hour. Would that make the rain stop? It doesn't, right? Your unhappiness doesn't change the world. What changes the world is that you recognize what's making you unhappy and take action to remove it. If you have a friend that's making you unhappy, they no longer need to be your friend. If you're, struggling with, something about relationships, in your family or at school or whatever, talk to somebody about them. If you're not doing very well in school, ask for help. All of those things, taking action instead of staying unhappy, I think are things that can make people, at younger age a lot happier. I also ask people to treat others as they like to be treated. It's the basic spiritual teaching is, if I am a young person and I feel offended when somebody writes a bad comment on my social networks, I shouldn't write bad comments on other people's social networks. Right? If we start to cultivate an environment where people are trying to make others happy instead of making each other miserable all the time, maybe our relationships as young people will change.
En español, Ángeles Bretón de la agencia Notimex. En este algoritmo que encontró de la felicidad, ¿identificó qué factor pesa más, si es la religión, el dinero, la familia o los amigos?
Religion, money, family, or friends. Let me explain the algorithm first, because when you understand it, you understand where all of these happen. Okay? The algorithm is a comparison between events of your life and your expectations and hopes of how life should be. Okay? Every moment in your life you ever felt unhappy was not a moment because something in specific happened. It was a moment because what happened was not what you wanted life to give you. Okay? So as I said, for example, yesterday about the rain, many people in Mexico City were a little unhappy about the rain. If it had rained in Dubai or in Egypt, we would be dancing in the streets. Okay? Rain is so wonderful to us that we want rain in our life. Rain itself doesn't make you happy or unhappy, it's what you want in comparison to the rain that makes you happy or unhappy. With that in mind, let's take them one by one. Friends make us unhappy because we expect to have people around us that will love us. Our expectation is that people around us will be good friends, they will love us. When we have friends, we feel happy. Money, unfortunately, by the reality of the modern world, we get convinced all the time that money is going to make us happy. Okay? We set the expectation that money is going to make us happy, so when we get money, we get a very short, like maybe an hour of happiness. Okay? And then we realize money is not making us happy at all. Ask yourself, you graduated university, you told yourself, if I work for a job that pays me 100, I'll be very happy. When you got 100, you told yourself, no, I meant 120. And then when you got 120, you said, oh, but now I'm an adult, I need to pay rent, I'm going to I'll be happy when I get 1,000. Right? It's constantly, it never changes our lives. You buy, a mobile phone, you look at it, and then you say like, wow, I love this new device. 2 minutes later, your friend shows up with another device, you go like, I wanted this other one, right? All things never make us happy, okay? Things without exception are illusions by the modern world. Happiness is found when you're okay with life as it is. So let's take a few things. Nature makes us happy. When we're out in nature, when we're watching a tree, or when we're sitting in a garden, or when in front of the ocean, we feel happy. Why? Because nature always meets our expectations. You never look at a tree that is a little crooked and say, this should be straight. No, you look at the tree and you say, trees are supposed to be straight. You don't pick a rose and say, why does it have thorns? You understand that roses have thorns, but you love them as they are. You never sit in front of the ocean and say, I like the view, but can someone mute the noise? Okay? You don't do that. And so we're happy in nature because nature, the event of nature always meets our expectations. We're happy when we have gratitude, because gratitude is to be thankful for the beautiful things that you have in your life, which basically means life does not only meet my expectation, it actually beats my expectation to the point where I actually feel gratitude, I'm thankful for life. So that makes us feel happy, and so on. Anything that shows up in your life that meets your wishes for how life should be, makes you happy. So I'm going to take your question the other way. What makes us unhappy is two things. One is either we don't see the events of life for what they really are, and the other is we set crazy expectations. Okay? If we set our events, if we see the events for the reality of what they are, if we set our expectations realistically, most of the time life meets our expectations, and most of the time we really have no reason to be unhappy. When it rains, our expectation should be, it's raining, but at least it's not raining bombs like it's raining in Syria. Okay? And so accordingly, we should be grateful for that. If we don't have enough money, we think about the people in Africa who don't even have enough food. Okay? And the reality is, if we live in Mexico, which is a beautiful, beautiful country, we're some of the luckiest people on earth.
Do you think we now live in a world of prosperity? Like the supermarkets are full and everything. And when we talk maybe to our parents or our grandparents, and they tell us, you know what, we had to gather around the food, and we would eat a little bit. We couldn't afford everybody eating everything like now we have. And I think maybe this prosperity and the fact that we don't have to fight for little things like food and like security and etc. Maybe is that the reason why sometimes we feel unhappy?
So there is a lot of challenges in the way we think about life. So think about it this way. If you look at the happiness equation, events minus expectations, then unhappiness simply is a survival mechanism. Okay? It's your brain looking at the world around it and saying something is wrong. Okay? Something is wrong means I need to do something about it to be safe, to be more prosperous, and so on and so forth. Regardless of what your life actually is, your brain can always find something wrong. Okay? So I can be sitting here with the wonderful company of so many wonderful people like you, in a country that I love so much, after a day that has been a successful day for me, and I could say, well, the tent is a little too cold. I can always find something wrong. Okay? The problem is, because of advertising and social media and all of the products that people try to send to us, we always feel that we're missing out on something. Okay? There is never going to be a day where Apple is going to advertise and say the iPhone 6 is as great as the day it came out. Okay? Apple always needs to advertise and say, you need the camera in the iPhone 10. Right? And because of that, we always feel that something is missing, but because of the advertising and all of the messages we get all the time, we start to feel that everything is wrong. We don't look at the reality that we have a mobile phone in our hand, which is by all means a miracle of technology. We look at the point that my friend has another one and I want the other one. We don't look at our wonderful partner, which might have some, every human has some issues, right? We don't look at the beautiful side of what they are, but we think about Tinder and the number of people out there that must be better than my partner, okay? The problem is that our expectations are wrong, and that what we need in life is so much less than what we actually chase all the time. If you truly stop looking at all of those messages and look at yourself and say, do I have what I need? You will find that most of what you need is there. Everything else that's driving you crazy are things that you want because they told you you should want them. If you see the truth, you realize that you don't want any of them at all.
Okay. In Spanish, please. A lo largo de tu carrera has trabajado en empresas cercanas a la información, a la tecnología. ¿Cómo ha influido esta en el desarrollo de tu algoritmo? ¿Crees que de entrar a tal vez el mundo literario o alguna otra empresa, alguna otra carrera sería diferente?
Of course. So there are many sides to technology. I have contributed heavily to many of the technologies you have in your hands today. So I worked on the early versions of smartphones in many companies, Microsoft and Google and so on. I worked on spreading Google search everywhere in the world and so on. And technology is a way of thinking, it's a way of life. And technology, of course, for many people, by the way, is not even positive for happiness anymore. Some of us will suffer because of technology. Many of the teenagers that we were talking about actually find a more difficult life because of technology. Now, technology itself is just a tool. I can use this tea to drink it, or I can throw it in your face, right? That's not the mistake of the tea, it's my mistake. The way I use it is what makes me happy or unhappy. So, working in technology for so long taught me two things. It taught me that in our world today, the possibility to spread messages across the world actually is so much easier. I say that with a lot of respect, but the message of Christianity from Jesus until it reached 2 billion people took 2,000 years. Not because it's not an amazing message, but because there was no internet. Larry Page took 15 years, only 15 years. Google could reach 2 billion users in 15 years. The world is moving faster and faster, and this is giving me the confidence that the 1 billion happy mission can actually happen, and it can happen in 5 years. That's number one. Number two is an understanding that we're not always correct in assuming that what we do is right. Okay? So for many of the products that I built, I was hoping, mobile phones for example, I was hoping that it will make people's lives easier. The reality is, unfortunately, it did in some aspects and it didn't in other aspects. And perhaps we should always question inside us what it is that we make decisions on. I'll go to your main question. And your main question is, could I have found more inspiration in literature, in languages, and so on? Don't get me wrong, I studied deeply in all of those. I read everything I could find. For example, on spiritual teachings, I am reasonably well versed in Islam, in Sufism, in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, in Christianity, which are all, and in Judaism, which are all faiths that I absolutely love and learn so much from. When it comes to languages, I speak 3 languages, and I can tell you, language is such an interesting way of looking at things, because Arabic is such a complex language. Arabic, by definition, is a language where every word has multiple meanings and every meaning has an endless number of words. And so when we look at sentences, we really debate the meaning of every sentence based on context. And this invited me in my life to question every belief that I have. Everything, so my book is all about inviting you to question what you believe. And that's a very natural way for the way an Arabic speaker would look at content and knowledge, right? Things like that really made a massive difference. So I don't come to the topic of happiness only from an algorithmic mathematical physics and technology point of view. I write the message this way because it's a message that has never been written this way before, and a lot of our people associate with this language today in the world. But definitely the content comes from a lot of spiritual literature, language, and other teachings, for sure.
Are you religious?
Am I religious? I am very religious, yes, but I'm not religious the way religion is. So I differentiate very heavily between spirituality and religion, okay? Spirituality is to believe that there is something bigger than we are, that we're not just our physical form, that there is more to us than the physical form. Religion takes those concepts and turns them into rituals and practices and do's and don'ts. Unfortunately, a big part of religion is not really from the Creator. It's from people who followed. So, the message, I'll talk about my own religion so that I don't look like I'm criticizing other religions. But in Islam, for example, 98% of the rituals and practices are actually not from the Quran and not from the words of Prophet Muhammad. They're from the disciples that came afterwards and with good intentions wanted to tell us what to do and what not to do. Now the question really becomes, if they wrote this 1,000 years ago or 1,400 years ago, does it mean that it continues to apply today, or is the core of the religion, the core of the spiritual teaching, what applies and changes across the ages? Right? And so you see across the world today a resistance to religion. It's not a resistance to spirituality. When people mix religion and spirituality, they reject both. But if they actually see the difference, there is an incredible part of the divine in us that I believe is the single reason why we exist in this world. Our life is all about a search that reflects on our own self, our own being. Part of it is physical and part of it is divine, and trying to ascend and become a better person. And of course, spirituality is an interesting and incredible contribution to this path.